The armory smelled of gun oil and dust, a sharp, metallic tang that clung to uniforms and lingered on skin. Private Elena Marquez had grown used to it during her endless days cataloging rifles, checking serial numbers, and cleaning weapons that others had dirted. She wasn't glamorous, she wasn't on the front lines, and she certainly wasn't on anyone's radar. She was to most the armory girl. But that afternoon, when the sun cast long golden stripes through the slats of the storage room, she overheard laughter outside. A group of Special Forces operators had just returned from a high-altitude training exercise in the mountains. They were legends on base. Broad shoulders, weathered faces, eyes that had seen more than most would ever dare to imagine. They didn't usually talk to her, except when they needed spare optics or extra magazines. This time, though, one of them, Sergeant First Class Briggs, lingered longer. He glanced through the racks of rifles, his eyes landing on the long steel case Elena had been carefully stowing. Inside, it was the M2010 Enhanced Sniper Rifle, with its extended barrel and precision scope. It wasn't her weapon, nothing in the armory really was. But she knew every piece of it, every screw, every ounce of balance. "You even know how to use that thing?" Briggs said with a grin. His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. Elena paused, straightened, and lifted her chin. "I can clean it better than anyone here. I can shoot it too." That made them laugh. One of the other operators, a tall man with a scar running across his jawline, leaned in. "Sure you can. Tell you what, armory girl, we've got a steel plate set up at 3,800 meters in the mountains. That's beyond what most of us even try. You hit it, dinner's on me for a month. You miss, you run gear for the team without complaint." The group chuckled, shaking their heads. Elena felt heat rise in her chest. They weren't just teasing. They were daring her to prove she was more than background noise. "I'll take that bet," she said, surprising even herself with the firmness of her voice. The laughter stopped. Briggs tilted his head, studying her. "You serious?" She nodded once. "Serious." The silence that followed was heavier than the rifle itself. Then Briggs slapped the steel table with his palm and said, "All right then, tomorrow morning. Mountain range. Don't be late." That night, Elena lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. 3,800 meters. She knew the math. Bullet drop measured in stories. Wind drift exaggerated by the canyon currents. The Earth's very rotation tugging on the round. It was a shot designed to humble even seasoned snipers. But in her mind, she wasn't just aiming at a steel plate. She was aiming at respect. The next morning, dawn painted the peaks in shades of fire. The mountains were both breathtaking and brutal, a world of wind, stone, and silence. The Special Forces team had already set up on the ridge, their spotting scopes glittering in the low light. Elena arrived carrying the rifle case, her boots crunching on the frosted ground. The men looked at her with skepticism, but Briggs simply gestured to the mat they had laid out. "There it is. Target's just past the third ridge. You won't even see it with the naked eye." Elena lay down, opening the rifle case like a ritual. She assembled the weapon piece by piece, her hands steady. Scope aligned, bipod locked, bolt checked. Her breath misted in the thin air as she pressed her cheek against the stock. Through the scope, she saw it, a faint shimmer of steel nearly 4 kilometers away, perched against the mountainside. It was impossibly small, no bigger than her thumb at arm's length. She exhaled slowly. "You even know your dope?" Briggs asked, crouching beside her. "Elevation, wind, Coriolis effect?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She was calculating, adjusting the dials, feeling the rifle become an extension of herself. Every hour in the armory had taught her precision. Every quiet night spent poring over manuals had taught her theory. Now was time to prove it. The wind shifted, whistling through the pines. She adjusted half a mil, elevated 14 clicks. The math was unforgiving. The margin of error, microscopic. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared, echoing through the mountains. The recoil punched her shoulder, the round disappearing into the void. The spotter lifted his head. Nothing. No clang of steel. No echo. Just silence. Elena didn't flinch. She adjusted again, feeling the wind tug differently now, angling across the canyon. Her second shot cracked out. This time, there was a faint, almost impossible to hear ping from miles away. The men froze. Briggs lowered his binoculars slowly, eyes wide. No way. Elena allowed herself the smallest smile. One hit. The impossible had bent, even if only for a moment. But Briggs leaned closer, voice low. Not bad, Armory girl. But one hit isn't the bet. The bet was 3 in a row. The challenge wasn't over. It had only just begun. The faint ping of the second shot still echoed in Elena's ears, though it had long since faded into the vast silence of the mountains. For her, it was proof that she wasn't just the girl in the armory, proof that hours of quiet study and practice weren't wasted. But for the operators around her, it was only a fluke, a lucky pull of the trigger. Good shot, one of them muttered, but his smirk betrayed doubt. Briggs crouched close, his weather-beaten face unreadable. Like I said, it's not one hit that matters. The bet was 3. Anyone can get lucky once. Elena steadied her breath, eyes fixed through the scope. The target shimmered again in a morning haze, so far away it felt like a ghost. Her heart pounded, but her hands remained still. She adjusted her dials, checking wind speed again. Wind's cutting different now, the spotter called. Quartering right to left, stronger past the ridge. She'd already felt it. The pines whispered differently, the thin air whistling higher. She made her corrections, double-checked her elevation. One mistake, and the bullet would vanish into oblivion. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Another thunderous crack split the mountain air. The recoil punched back into her shoulder. She lifted her head, heart frozen. Ping! The steel sang again, faint but clear. The operators stirred now, disbelief breaking into murmurs. One even swore under his breath. 2 in a row, someone muttered. Hell, I've seen trained snipers miss that distance. Elena forced herself to stay calm. Excitement was the enemy. She couldn't let adrenaline ruin her focus. She leaned back into the scope. The steel plate shimmered like a mirage. This was it, the third shot. The one that would prove beyond doubt that she was no armory rat. She checked the wind again, but now it was shifting, swirling in unpredictable eddies as the sun climbed higher. Her gut twisted. This wasn't the kind of shot you solve with just math. It needed instinct. Elena, Briggs murmured, for the first time using her name instead of the dismissive nickname. Don't overthink it. Trust the rifle. Trust yourself. She closed her eyes for half a breath, then exhaled, long and slow. When her fingers squeezed, it felt like the world held still. The rifle barked, smoke curling from the muzzle. Everyone held their breath. For a heartbeat. Nothing. Then across the mountains, steel rang for the third time. A chorus of shouts erupted. Disbelief. Cheers. Even a low whistle from the scar-faced operator. Briggs' grin broke wide across his weathered face. 3 in a row. Damn. Guess dinner's on me for a long while. Elena slowly sat up, her body buzzing with both exhaustion and triumph. She had done it. 3 shots at a distance many wouldn't even attempt. But as the cheers settled, Briggs leaned close again, voice low so only she could hear. You know what that means, don't you? Nobody gets that kind of precision without more than just theory. You got something rare, Marquez. Something we could use. The words hung heavier than the rifle. She hadn't just won a bet. She had opened a door, one that led far beyond the quiet safety of the armory. And part of her, deep down, knew she was ready to step through. That evening, Elena sat alone in the mess hall, the din of laughter and chatter filling the room. The Special Forces operators sat at their usual table, loud and confident, but now their glances toward her carried something different. No longer dismissive, no longer amused. Respect. Briggs approached, carrying his tray. He sat across from her, his presence filling the space even before he spoke. "You surprised a lot of people today," he said, cutting into his steak. "Most of all me." Elena sipped her coffee, unsure how to respond. Compliments from men like him weren't common. He leaned forward. "You ever thought about leaving the Armory? About trying out for something more?" Her pulse quickened. Of course she had thought about it. Countless nights, staring at the racks of rifles, she had wondered why she knew every bolt, every scope adjustment, every trajectory, yet never carried them into battle. But wanting and daring were two different things. "You're saying special forces?" she asked, her voice steady though her hands clenched under the table. Briggs gave a small shrug. "I'm saying the Army wastes talent sometimes. And you've got something we don't see every day." He paused, then added, "We're running a joint mission soon. High risk, long-range overwatch needed. Normally, I wouldn't even consider someone without a stack of credentials. But after today," he let the sentence trail off. Her chest tightened. "A mission, a real one. You're serious?" He smiled faintly. "Dead serious. Think of it as your real test. No bets, no laughter. Just you, your rifle, and lives depending on your shot." The room's noise seemed to fade. Lives depending on her. She wasn't sure if it was pride or fear rising in her chest, but she nodded slowly. "When do we leave?" "Briefing's at 0500. Get some rest. You'll need it." Briggs stood, clapped her shoulder, and left. Elena sat motionless, the weight of the moment pressing on her. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. This was about stepping into a world where failure meant more than embarrassment. It meant blood. That night, as she lay in her bunk, the memory of the 3 shots rang in her ears. Each one had carried her further away from the Armory and closer to a battlefield she had only imagined. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "You wanted this. Now, prove you belong." Outside, the mountains loomed under the moonlight, silent and watchful, as if waiting to see what she would do next. The briefing room was dim, lit only by the glow of the projector. Maps of the border region sprawled across the screen, jagged ridgelines and valleys forming a maze of harsh terrain. Elena sat among hardened operators, their weathered faces unreadable as Briggs explained the mission. "Intel confirms the insurgents are moving a weapons convoy through the valley here," he said, tapping a point on the map. "Our job is to intercept before it crosses into civilian territory. Overwatch will be critical. One mistake, one truck slipping through, and those weapons end up in the wrong hands." His gaze landed on Elena. She shifted in her chair, but held his eyes. "You'll be positioned here," he continued, pointing to a ridgeline overlooking the valley. 3 clicks away. Long shot, unstable winds. Not ideal conditions, but I've seen what you can do." Some of the operators exchanged doubtful glances. One muttered, "First mission and she's on the trigger? Hell of a gamble." Briggs didn't flinch. "We don't gamble. We prepare. And she's prepared." The room fell silent. Later, as they loaded gear into the transport helicopter, Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. The rifle case felt heavier than ever, not just metal and optics, but the weight of expectation. She tightened her gloves, reminding herself of every hour spent studying wind drift, every diagram memorized, every late-night test shot in the empty range. The rotors thundered overhead as the team climbed aboard. Inside, the men checked weapons, cracked jokes, and chewed gum as if heading to a routine patrol. Elena sat quietly, eyes closed, visualizing the ridge, the target, the shot. Briggs sat beside her. "Nervous?" he asked over the roar. She opened her eyes. "Focused." He grinned. "Good answer." The helicopter lifted, plunging into the night sky. The ride was rough, turbulence shaking them as they crossed into hostile territory. When the bird finally dropped low, hugging the ridgeline, the ramp opened to a blast of cold mountain air. "Move!" Briggs barked. They disembarked fast, boots crunching into rocky soil. The night smelled of pine and dust, the stars sharp and cruel overhead. Elena slung her pack and followed the spotter assigned to her, a lean operator named Davis. Their climb up the ridge was grueling, loose stone sliding underfoot, thin air burning her lungs. Sweat stung her eyes, but she kept pace. Davis glanced back once, surprise flickering across his face. She wasn't slowing down. At the top, she dropped to her belly, sliding into position. Davis set up the spotting scope while she assembled her rifle with careful precision. Each click of the bipod legs, each twist of the suppressor felt louder than it should. Below, the valley spread out like a dark ocean. A winding road snaked through, barely visible under starlight. Somewhere along it, the convoy would come. Hours crawled by. The cold seeped in her bones, her breath fogging faintly. Every sound, a shifting rock, a distant coyote, made her nerves spark. Then Davis whispered, "Movement! Convoy incoming!" Her heart leapt. Through the scope, headlights flickered, bouncing along the rough road. Trucks, armored, guarded by armed men. They moved slow but steady. "Targets confirmed," Davis said. "Priority is the lead driver. Take it when ready." She steadied her breathing. This wasn't steel plates. These were men, real lives. Her finger brushed the trigger. The rifle cracked, thunder rolling across the mountains. The windshield of the lead truck exploded, the driver slumping as the vehicle swerved violently. Shouts erupted below. The convoy ground to a halt. Armed men scrambled for cover. "Hit!" Davis hissed. "Beautiful shot. They're disorganized. Take the gunner." Another squeeze. Another crack. A machine gunner collapsed before he could fire. Elena adjusted again, adrenaline surging. Her world narrowed to the crosshairs and the targets scrambling below. Every shot was deliberate, every exhale releasing both fear and fire. By the time the rest of the squad stormed the valley, the convoy was crippled, chaos reigning. The operators mopped up the resistance, clearing the road with brutal efficiency. From her perch, Elena sat back, chest heaving. She had done it. She had fired not for pride, not for a bet, but to save lives. And she knew she would never be the same. When dawn finally broke over the valley, the battlefield was quiet. Smoke curled from burning trucks, the acrid scent of fuel and metal hanging in the cold air. Elena descended the ridge with Davis, her legs trembling from both exhaustion and adrenaline. On the ground, the operators regrouped, checking casualties, securing weapons. Briggs stood at the center, barking orders with his usual gravelly authority. As Elena approached, several soldiers glanced her way. Their looks were different now, no longer skeptical or mocking, but heavy with acknowledgement. Briggs turned as she arrived. 3 confirmed kills, 2 precision disables on vehicles. Not bad for your first dance. She swallowed hard. I did what was needed. He studied her, as if weighing the steel in her voice. Finally, he nodded. That's the right answer. Don't glorify it. Don't diminish it. Just accept it. Later, as they loaded the prisoners and salvaged weapons, one of the operators, the scar-faced man who'd laughed at her back in the armory, approached. He extended a hand. "Marquez," he said gruffly. "Didn't think you had it in you. Guess I was wrong." She shook his hand, the gesture brief but meaningful. Respect wasn't given lightly here. Yet, as the day wore on, a strange heaviness settled over her. Each face she'd seen in her scope returned to her mind, frozen in the instant before the trigger broke. She had ended lives. Necessary or not, it gnawed at her. That night, back at base, the mess hall buzzed with energy. The mission was a success. Laughter and stories filled the air. Briggs even raised a toast. "To Marquez," he said, lifting his glass. "From the Armory to Overwatch. You carried the ridge tonight." Cheers followed, loud and sincere. Elena forced a smile, but inside, doubt lingered. When the noise quieted and she slipped outside, the night air was cool, the stars stretching endlessly overhead. She leaned against the wall, her hands trembling. Briggs found her there, silent as ever until he spoke. "You did well," he said. She exhaled slowly. "I don't feel like celebrating." They were enemies, but they were still people. Briggs nodded. "First time always hits hardest. And if it didn't, that's when you should worry. The weight doesn't go away, Elena. You just learn to carry it." She looked at him, searching his scarred face for something. Comfort, maybe. All she found was truth. And deep down, she knew she would carry that weight forever. The next mission came sooner than anyone expected. 2 weeks after the convoy ambush, Elena found herself seated once again in the briefing room, the air thick with tension. Briggs stood at the front, his jaw tight, his tone clipped. "We have a problem. Recon drones confirm that an enemy splinter group is operating inside our sector. Small, fast-moving, well-equipped. They've hit supply routes twice in the last 48 hours. Both times they vanished before we could track them." He tapped a finger against the map. "This valley here is our best lead. We suspect they've established a hidden base among the caves. Intel also suggests they may have inside help, someone feeding them information." A ripple of unease moved through the room. Betrayal was the dirtiest word in the military. Elena sat straighter. Inside help? Could that mean one of them? After the briefing, Briggs pulled her aside. "Marquez, you'll be Overwatch again, but this time with a different partner. Davis is reassigned. You'll be with Sergeant Keller." She blinked. Keller, the same operator who had extended his hand after the convoy mission. Gruff, scar-faced, known for his combat record. Respectable, but not someone she trusted easily. "Yes, sir," she said, masking her hesitation. The mission unfolded under a blood-red sunset. The team inserted by Hello, boots hitting dirt hard. The valley was quiet, eerily so, wind whistling through the rocks like whispers. Elena and Keller split from the main force, climbing to a vantage point overlooking the cave system. "You take point on the rifle," Keller said, setting down the spotting scope. "I'll call targets, just like you did with Davis." She nodded, lying prone, her cheek against the stock. The crosshairs swept across the valley, searching for movement. Minutes bled into an hour, tension coiling like a spring. Finally, shapes emerged from the cave mouth, armed insurgents, their weapons slung casually. Elena exhaled, steadying herself. "Targets confirmed," Keller murmured. "On your mark." She squeezed. A sharp crack. One man fell instantly. Chaos erupted. The others scattered for cover, shouting. But as she adjusted for a second shot, Keller's voice cut in, sharp and unexpected. "Hold!" She frowned. "What?" "Don't shoot." "Not yet." Confusion prickled at her. The insurgents were regrouping, moving equipment. "Why hold?" "Keller, we have a window. I can take." "I said hold." His tone brooked no argument. Something was wrong. Through her scope, she caught sight of a man in the group. Not insurgent. His uniform was foreign, darker, cleaner. He carried himself like someone trained. He handed a packet of documents to one of the fighters. Her stomach lurched. Inside help. The rumors were true. But when she opened her mouth to speak, Keller's rifle shifted. Not at the enemy, at her. "Easy now, Marquez," he said quietly. "Put the rifle down." Her blood went cold. "You?" He smirked, scar pulling tight across his cheek. "Smart girl. Smarter than I gave you credit for. But you've seen too much. Orders are orders." Her pulse roared in her ears. She had seconds, maybe less. Instead of lowering her rifle, she jerked sideways, rolling down the slope as his shot cracked overhead. Rock exploded where her head had been. She hit the ground hard, scrambling for cover. "Keller's compromised," she shouted into her comms, breath ragged. "Repeat, Keller's." Static. Jammed. Heart hammering, she crawled behind a boulder, gripping her rifle tight. She wasn't just fighting insurgents anymore. She was fighting one of her own. The valley erupted into chaos. Insurgents scattered, their shouts echoing off the rock. Keller fired again, bullets sparking against her cover. "You won't make it out alive, Marquez," his voice rang across the ridge. "No one will believe you. They'll call it nerves, rookie panic." She pressed her back against the stone, forcing herself to breathe. Think. Panic was death. Her rifle was still with her, but lining up a shot meant exposing herself. Keller was experienced, patient. He'd wait for her to slip. Carefully, she reached in her pack and pulled out a smoke grenade. With a flick, she tossed it uphill. It clattered, hissed, and white fog billowed out, swallowing the ridge. "Cheap trick," Keller snarled. But his shots grew wilder, uncertain. Elena crawled low, circling the smoke, keeping her movement silent. Her training whispered in her head. Patience, position, precision. Through the thinning fog, she spotted him, crouched, rifle aimed where she'd been. His scarred face was a mask of focus. Slowly, she brought her scope to her eye. Crosshairs hovered over his chest. Her finger trembled on the trigger. This was no enemy across the border. This was a man she'd eaten with, fought alongside, maybe even trusted. But then she remembered Briggs' words. Don't glorify it. Don't diminish it. Just accept it. She exhaled, squeezed. The shot cracked. Keller's body jerked, rifle clattering from his hands as he collapsed. Silence. Elena lay there, staring through the scope, chest heaving. She had survived, but at a cost she hadn't imagined. By the time the rest of the squad reached her, the insurgents had fled into the mountains. Briggs found her kneeling beside Keller's body, rifle limp in her hands. "What happened?" he demanded. She met his eyes. He was the leak. He turned on me. I didn't have a choice." Briggs studied her, face unreadable. Then, slowly, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You made the hardest choice a soldier can make," he said quietly. "And you did alone." The weight of those words crushed her, heavier than any rifle. Later, back at base, Elena sat on her bunk, staring at her hands. They no longer looked like her own. She had killed enemies, yes. But tonight, she had killed a brother in arms. The line between friend and foe had blurred, and she knew it would haunt her forever. Yet, deep down, through the grief and doubt, a seed of steel remained. She had survived betrayal. She had faced fire from within. And though scarred, she was still standing. And in war, sometimes that was victory enough.